Hey, what's up guys? Welcome back. Long awaited video today. We are finally going to take this Les Paul and upgrade it. We've got some awesome stuff from Solo Music Gear and Gun Street Guitar Wiring Shop. This is going to be fantastic. So it's finally time. We're going to replace the pickups, the hardware, the whole works here, really, the nut. It's going to be a whole lot of upgrades packed into one video. But before we get started on that, I think maybe we should do a quick demo, play it once more, see how it sounds so that we can get a nice comparison. So yeah, let's do that. Well, I really do love this guitar. I'm quite fond of it. I've already got the plates off the back. I'm so excited to get to work on it here. I think we can all agree that although this guitar looks pretty awesome, at least in my opinion, and is very comfortable to play, it could benefit from some better electronics, better tuning stability, and actually an aesthetic upgrade. So yeah, let's get to work on that. So it's time to start throwing in some of these beautiful upgrade parts that I got from Solo Music Gear here. We've got some Goto parts, we've got some Shaler, whatever it is, the Tusk nut, the Wilkinson pickups. These things are all gonna look just fantastic in here. The Gibson knobs, and then our modern wiring set here from Gun Street Guitar Shop. You can see the quality difference just by looking at that as compares to the kit wiring, but we'll get a closer look at that when the time comes here. So for now, let's get this thing disassembled. You can see me pulling off the hardware here. make sure you rewrap those strings the way that they normally come so that you don't lose an eye, because if you guys lose an eye, you're not going to be able to watch my videos properly, and that would just be a shame, wouldn't it? So we're taking out the pegs here. I'm actually going to leave the mounting studs in there, not the pegs themselves, but the sleeves. The reason for that is I like the combination of the black and the gold. You certainly can take them out, and if you want to do that, you're simply going to use a longer bolt that fits in there, tighten it down carefully, and it'll press those out. But I like the combination of the black and the gold, and you'll see me kind of do a couple comparisons as I go here just by eye to determine if there are other places where I can use that combination. But that fits the theme with my pickups and pickup rings, it fits the theme with my nut, and so I wanted some black in that portion of the hardware. Here I am taking out these tuners. I'm basically done now, and we're going to move on to take off the truss rod cover so that I can knock that nut out of there. Make sure you cut around the nut lightly with a razor blade before you knock it out. I don't actually show myself knocking it out of there, but cut around it first, or you run the risk of chipping off not only your paint but also your veneer with a guitar like this. So be very careful about that. Just score the edge around it and then knock it out gently with a piece of wood. Now you've been watching me use that socket there. You can buy sockets that work for these from StewMac, but it's just a 10mm socket. So if you've got a socket set, a wrench or anything like that, and you don't want to pay the ridiculous price that StewMac charges, there's no reason to pay that price because it's just a standard tool branded a little differently. Here I'm going to disassemble the electronics, so I take off the jack plate. I use my soldering iron to remove the solder joints because I want to be able to use this hardware again if I need to, or give it to somebody and have it be useful for them. So I don't just want to cut the wires because then it'll be a huge pain to deal with later. You just heat up those joints to unsolder them. Make sure you protect the area around your cavities as you've seen me do here with the tape, or if you're heating stuff up, pull it away from the cavity so that it's nowhere near the guitar and you don't run the risk of burning anything. Again, over here with the switch cavity, I'm still protecting that cavity and heating up the solder to be able to disconnect stuff, and then I can just pull out all of the electronics and I'm back to basically a clean slate. These pickup rings came flat. This is a carved top guitar, it's got an arch to it, so I'm using a razor blade, and that's how I'm putting that arch in there. I check it every couple swipes and just make sure that I haven't gone too far and that I'm kind of getting the radius right so that it matches up nicely to the top. Here's that comparison. You can see the size difference, the difference in the wiring, the difference in the caps. This wiring harness is just so much higher quality. I did have to take some of my tools in there and widen out the back of the channel that the jack goes in so that I don't have to unsolder it because it's all shrink wrapped together and everything heat wrapped. So I did that, got my jack installed, and I'm feeding my wires through here so I can get all of my electronics in place. But I note that when I go to install the pots here, and you'll see in a second, they're so much bigger because there's such high quality pot that they actually don't fit through the holes in the front of the guitar. So I'm faced here with a situation where I need to drill those out, and that can be very scary when you're working with a finished guitar like this. So what I'll tell you for that is make sure you're using a sharp drill bit. Go from the front, from the finished side. You can put a piece of tape over there as well if you're worried, but what I do is I make sure I've got a brand new bit basically, or a very sharp one, and I just drill with almost no pressure. It's not so much slowly that's the issue as that you begin by using basically no pressure so it can wear away at that edge without chipping and peeling off a chunk of your finish. Not a huge concern comparatively when you've got a good bond, but still something that you definitely need to be wary of. It does happen to people more frequently than it should. So I pushed these through here, and I chose that bit so that they would be snug, and they are. They sit in place nicely on their own there so that I can go ahead and tighten those nuts on top and make sure that everything's secured. I'm going to go in with my socket again here, and I just feel from the back and make sure that I'm not twisting anything. Because of how tight these are, it's not so much of an issue, but I've got my one hand underneath there, holding them in place to make sure that they don't turn so I don't put undue stress on the wires or anything, and you don't have to crank these down too hard. Now it's time to get that switch installed. The first thing you want to do is wire it up before you install it. I put my pots in before I finish wiring the pickups to them because it's fairly easy to do afterward, or at least I find it easy to do. But for this, twist all of those wires into place and then solder it, and you'll find that much easier. This isn't a soldering tutorial. I'm not very good at soldering, so you can find much better tutorials on that elsewhere, but that's how I get it set up. Here I am trying to change that switch to see if I can put the black one on that I had before, just for the switch tip, but it doesn't fit. It's much smaller, so I leave it at the cream one, and that ends up actually looking awesome as far as I'm concerned. But like I said before, I am kind of looking to incorporate some black into this theme with the gold, so I figured I'd give it a try. And here I actually have a reason to use pickup rings finally, even though I don't generally like to use them that often, because the black just looks good. Be careful when you're doing this if you're changing your pickups and putting in rings that you didn't have before or something like that, because you need to make sure that they're centered properly. So I go in and I'm careful. I use a square and I make sure that everything is centered accurately, and then you'll see me pull out a square again to make sure that my second pickup is perfectly in line with my first, and I don't have some kind of weird offset going between them that's going to cause one to not be as loud as the other because the magnet poles aren't centered underneath the strings properly. That's a situation that you want to make sure you're avoiding when you're installing any kind of pickup, of course. I'm sure it gets more complicated when you install those angled ones that you see so often on multi-scale guitars, but on a guitar like this, it's actually quite straightforward. You just want to go in and measure properly and make sure that everything is well lined up. So that's what you see me doing here. I'm taking the square to it, shifting things as necessary because the wires can sometimes put pressure in there underneath and cause the pickups to shift sideways. So I make sure that I kind of take a look at where it sits against the grain and everything, and that's where I peg it into place with these screws. The very small screws, they go in quite easily. I do recommend doing small pilot holes. Again, you need to be careful anytime you're drilling through a finished surface, so make sure that you're not putting a lot of pressure on when you start, and then drill your pilot holes that way. That being said, if you're confident that you don't need pilot holes, then so be it. Because this is in the middle like this, the chances of you cracking the wood are slim to none. You just need to make sure that you're applying the proper pressure to the screw to make sure that it's actually going in as opposed to lifting up the finish, or worst case, on a cheaper kit, you could possibly run into a situation where it would lift the veneer a little bit. So make sure again that you're pushing hard enough to avoid that situation without kind of causing undue stress on the surface of the guitar if possible. Now luckily for me, this bridge drops right into place in the old peg spots. I could have gotten a different gold bridge and I would have had to make some modifications, but the guys over at Solo made sure that I got one that made sense with this, so huge thank you to them. This goes in very easily and it just looks and works awesome. Way more adjustability on this bridge too. These pots are easier to solder, I would say, than the ones I had before, partially just because there's so much room on the back of them because they're so big and just high quality. So a huge thank you, of course, to Gun Street Guitar Shop for sending those along. They turned out awesome. You'll see when I do the demo. Here I'm trying the black ring from my old tuners on here. I couldn't use the whole thing because they're a different depth, so I just compared that washer with the gold one, and I decided against it. It looks better in all gold, I found. So I'm putting these tuners in the way they're meant to be done, essentially, with all the Goto parts. These stick out way less than the other tuners. They're real tight to the surface there, even when I crank them down a little bit, and that's great. That causes a little bit more string tension because it increases the angle at which the strings come over the nut, and it's yeah, these tuners are a cut above. I'm very happy with them. They're really high quality, beautiful locking tuners. So I'm really glad that I was sent these ones in particular. I think Goto is going to be my go-to brand, so to speak, from now on. This, I'm again using that nut driver. I'm not tightening them down too crazy here because I don't want to put an impression in the top or anything like that. They don't need to be tightened down that crazy. They go in nice and easy. You get them good and snug, and then you go in from the back and you put the screws in place. I didn't put the screws in when I initially assembled the kit because my intent all along was to make sure that I did a cool upgrade on it, and I didn't want to risk drilling a bunch of little pilot holes that I wouldn't end up needing or that would be in the way and not work with the new tuners. So now that I've got the set on there that I imagine I'm going to keep, or if I don't keep them, I'm going to get the same kind in a different color however many years down the road when I decide to change my mind, I went ahead and actually screwed these into the back like you're supposed to. It's not paramount. You can get away without it. Your tuners will still work, but it helps tuning stability. It helps keep everything sturdy and where it needs to be so that it can function properly. So if you've got your permanent set of tuners in there and you're not planning on changing them, go ahead and put those screws in. It is going to help the guitar just be a slightly better instrument overall. The strap locks are next here, so I'm drilling my pilot holes and you'll see that I'm putting the one on top in a weird spot, not where you would normally see it on a Les Paul. I'm putting in strap locks. I didn't put in the original buttons because I knew I would want to upgrade to locks, and if I were putting in buttons here, even nice ones, that's not where I would put it on the top. You'll see when I go to actually play this that there's some pressure there. That is where I like it. That's where it's most comfortable for me, and that's where I wanted it. But if I put it on a button, the strap would probably just pop right off. Because I have a lock, it's fine there. But again, with a strap button, you have to be more careful. I am loving this gold hardware at this point. It just looks awesome with that beautiful spalted maple top. I really couldn't be happier with how this thing ended up looking. The only thing left to do here, and you'll see me get to work on that in a moment, is the nut. There are some great tutorials out there on how to deal with installing the nut and making sure that it's the right height and everything, and I really don't have time to get into it in any depth in this video. What I will say is that I'm making use of the Hosco tools that I was sent by Solo Music Gear to install it and, you know, make sure that the nut slots are the right depth and everything so that my action is good. If you want any of this hardware, if you want any of these tools, check out the links in the description. The link for Solo Music Gear will take you to basically everything I've got in this video, including the kit, the tools, and the hardware, with the exception of that wiring harness, and that link for Gun Street Guitar Shop will also be in the description. So check that stuff out. It's great stuff. As you can see, I'm really happy with all of it. And if you use the link in the description for the Solo Music Gear stuff, it helps me out as well. Of course, if you don't want to help me out, that is perfectly fine. Just go to Solo Music Gear's website without using that link and pick up whatever you want there, because you're going to find some awesome stuff. This is our finished product. We've got the stock Gibson knobs, we've got the Goto hardware, we've got the Tusk nut. Everything turned out fantastic and I'm real happy with it. Well, I gotta say, I am pretty happy with that. That looks awesome. But, of course, we're on now to the most important part. Let's test it out and see how it sounds, shall we? Well, guys, that is it. Yeah, I'm super happy with this. It looks exactly like I wanted. I even had a reason to use pickup rings for a change. I'm stoked with how it sounds. Controls feel great. Everything's just really high quality in here now. So very happy. That's it for this video. If I didn't say it 100 times, or even if I did in the voiceover there, huge thank you again to Solo Music Gear for sending me all of this stuff, except of course the wiring harness. Huge thank you to Gun Street Guitar Shop for sending me that. Very happy with it. Super easy to install, and really, helps me out because I'm nothing when it comes to wiring. I'm terrible at it. But in any event, that's it for this video, and I guess that is it for this guitar. It's finally fully upgraded and where it needs to be, unless someday I change my mind. But I can't see that happening anytime soon because I'm really happy with it. Remember to stay tuned, stick around, subscribe if you haven't already, because this one is coming up next. And yeah, I've got some crazy plans for this guy. We're going to have a lot of content coming up on that one. If you haven't already, check out the couple videos that I've done on it so far with the unboxing and everything and the stock hardware demo. And if for some reason you haven't seen the series where I built this guitar, well, you're probably going to want to see that, right? So check that out too. So thank you for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please feel free to give it a thumbs up. I would appreciate it. Let me know what you think in the comments section below of the color scheme I chose. And yeah, I will see you next time. Have a good one.